we're going to be discussing the most important questions about the 12 steps in our program of recovery. So let's look at each step one by one. Number one says we admitted we were powerless over pornography, that our lives had become unmanageable. So it's kind of a confusing question. What did Bill Wilson really mean to say here? What is this? We admitted we were powerless over pornography, that our lives had become unmanageable. It's very confusing. You know, what's the problem? What's the solution? Bill Wilson, when he originally wrote this step, he actually wanted to write it as follows. We admitted that our lives had become unmanageable, that we were powerless over pornography. Now, that's an important distinction here. When we say, as written, we admitted that we were powerless over pornography, that our lives had become unmanageable, understanding then that the problem is not the pornography, the problem is the unmanageability. It seems to be a little bit confusing. Why did Bill Wilson write it this way? Why didn't he write it the way it's supposed to be in terms of cause and effect? Which would have been much better for him to write, we admitted that our lives had become unmanageable, that we were powerless over pornography. Here's why. Is because when he wrote the 12 steps, the first step says literally that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Having been written the other way around, his followers, his colleagues said, no, Bill, you can't do that. Nobody's going to come to your program or read your book if the first thing you ask them to do is to admit that their lives had become unmanageable. No narcissistic, self-centered, egotistical man is going to admit that his life is unmanageable. In fact, when he's standing in his living room and he looks outside the window and he sees that the automobile is totaled in the driveway, he's going to say, it's because of my drinking. When he goes to the mailbox and he looks in the mailbox and there's foreclosure notice on his home, he's going to say, it's because of my drinking. When he goes to the kitchen table and he sees divorce notice by his wife, he's going to be saying, well, it's because of my drinking. That is why a man will enter the program and read this book. That's why Bill Wilson had to say, we admitted we're powerless over alcohol, and in our case, that we are powerless over pornography, that our lives had become unmanageable. Next, let's try to understand the cause and effect of addictive behavior. Because there's a lot of confusion here, especially from step number one, which says we admitted we were powerless over pornography, that our lives had become unmanageable. What's the cause and effect? I mean, if I take this book and I lift it up and then I drop it and it makes a loud sound on the table, the cause is that I dropped the book. The effect is that it made a loud sound on the table. In the writing of step number one, it's reversed. The effect is the pornography addiction. The cause is the unmanageability of life. Now we need to understand really what is our problem and what is our solution. Based on our understanding of cause and effect, now we really understand that our problem is the unmanageability of life, which causes our need to escape. Our need to escape, which is caused by the pain from the unmanageability of life. And of course, as we all know, our escape, our drug of choice as it's called, is pornography. Let's ask the question, what is the cause and effect cycle of the addictive behavior? Well, if we look at the first step, it's a little bit backwards. When we look at the statement that says, we admitted that we were powerless over pornography, that our lives had become unmanageable, it seems like our problem is pornography, when in fact our problem is unmanageability. We understand that if we look a little bit closer where it says we admitted we were powerless over pornography, that our lives had become unmanageable. That word had implies that what came first is the unmanageability of life. Then followed the use of our drug of choice, in our case, pornography. Very important to understand what is cause and effect. If I take something and I drop it on the table and it makes a loud noise, the cause is that I drop it. The noise from the table is the effect. That's cause and effect. It's important for us to understand, especially as we go through the 12 steps, what is the cause and what is the effect? Because lust and pornography are the solution The problem is the unmanageability of life. Now let's dial into one specific word in step number 1, which is unmanageable. We admitted that we're powerless over pornography, that our lives had become unmanageable. What the heck does the word unmanageable mean? You know, unmanageability sounds like something that I'm in a situation and I can't manage it. I can't manage the fact that I have to pay taxes this year, et cetera, et cetera. Well, while that might be true, what is really important to understand is that unmanageability means simply that things just don't go my way. And that includes everything and anything in our life that really upsets us. We might have a situation, and often we do with our spouse. It becomes unmanageable. It's unmanageable to me when I serve a bowl of cereal to my child and he spills it onto the floor. Well, that's unmanageability. Things aren't going my way. I want to get out of the house. I want to get into the house. I want to get out of bed. I want to get into bed. Things don't go my way. That's an unmanageable life. An unmanageable life is what leads me to pain and the need to escape and turning to my drug of choice, which is pornography. In step number 2, it is written, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Well, what is sanity? What is that word sanity? You know, it conjures up an image of people that are like cuckoo in a psychiatric hospital and they're insane. We know from that word insane. Is that insanity? Is that what I'm suffering from? Is that what I'm asking God to do, is to restore me to sanity? I would claim I'm not a crazy person. If it's only crazy people that look at pornography, then I'm okay. I can continue to look at pornography. Well, Bill Wilson learned in law school that you don't repeat a word twice in the same paragraph. In step number 1, he says that our lives had become unmanageable. In step number 2, he says that God, a higher power, can restore us to sanity. They mean the same thing. One's the opposite of the other. Either our lives are unmanageable, but also they're insane. Sanity means manageability. Manageability, sanity contribute to our peace of mind. Peace of mind contributes to our recovery mindset, and the consequence of that is sobriety. Let's look at step number 3 and see if we can understand when it says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to care of God. All right, it sounds nice, but what the heck is will and our lives? What does that mean, our will and our lives? What's our will and our lives? How do we turn that over to the God of our understanding? So first, let's look at the word will. Will should remind us about something that happens as we near the end of our life, where we feel that we have to distribute the assets that we've accumulated over our lifetime. So what do? We go to our attorney, and the attorney says, okay, David C., what is it that you want to distribute? So I list the assets that I have that I want to be distributed. Then he says, okay, who do you want to distribute them to? And I list my wife, my son, my daughter, my grandkids, some charity. And the attorney writes that all down into something that's called the will. The will is essentially an expression of my thought process, an expression of my thinking, all right? So when I say I want to turn my will over to God, that means my thought process. And my life, to turn my will, we turn our will and our lives over to care of God. Lives, if you look at a history book, you see about a person's actions, all the things they did in their life. That's what their life is. So what Bill Wilson is essentially telling us, what we need to understand from step number 3, is that when we turn our will and our lives over to care of God as we understood Him, means that we're turning over our thoughts and our actions. Our thoughts are how we think. Our actions are how we behave. Let's look at step number 4, 5, 6, and 7 as a group, because there's an interesting word choice that Bill uses. In step number 4, he asks us to make a fearless and searching moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And number 6, he says we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And in number 7, we say, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Well, Bill, why? Why why are there so many things that we're trying to ask God to do or that we're trying to discover about ourselves? Well, when Bill Wilson went to law school in the 1930s, his professor told him that he can't use the same word twice in one paragraph. But essentially, what we should learn from this, in number 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, is made a searching and fearless inventory of our character defects. And number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, which is the exact nature of our character defects. And number 6, it's clearly stated, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And number 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings is humbly ask Him to remove our defects of character. Friends, it's our defects of character that are getting in the way of our ability to have a peaceful and joyful life. Our defects of character are getting in the way of our being able to connect and relate to other people. It's our defects of character that cause us to have issues with life, and we just want to manage life to go our way. That's from our defects of character. And when we look at our defects of character more closely, when we look at our shortcomings, our moral inventory, and we see in column number 4, the 4-step inventory, we find selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, need to control, scared of loss, and inconsiderate. These are defects of character. And what do they have in common is it's our ego. It's our ego, my fragile ego, my inability to think about others first, and my constant focus on what's in it for me, what's in it for me. My defects of character are messing my life up. And when my life has become unmanageable, I have to go act out.